We started working together in June of 2021. I was on our camp call this morning going through our OKRs, and it's just, it's such essential alignment that I really can't imagine that not being part of my week, but also part of my execution as a CRO, which is to know what everyone else is working on, to have confidence that those objectives are going to drive my shared key results,
Right.
and that we have created a mechanism where there is beautiful sunlight on every objective, where we all truly do own it together and can kind of challenge each other, but also support each other to make sure that even if that's not my responsibility, I'm doing what I can to make sure that it happens too, because we want to see all those checked off by the end of that quarter.
Right. Feels good.
Oh my God, it feels amazing. It's part of our pre-work as we go in and we say, hey, how did we do?
Right.
And marking to done versus on track or off track. It's like the little gold stars that you never get when you're an adult. It's the little micro encouragement.
Welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged. How are you?
Jeff, I'm good. I'm so happy to be here.
And where are you right now? You used to be in Ojai.
That's right. I am in Austin, Texas, where it is 85 degrees with 100% humidity.
For people that don't know, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Flowspace.
I'm Anne Hallock. I am the Chief Revenue Officer at Flowspace. Flowspace is a software platform in the fulfillment industry. So e-commerce, retail, everyone who orders something, it has to get to them somehow. We are 7 years old. We came out of Y Combinator in the summer of 2017. Our co-founders, Ben Eachus and Jason Harbert, really had, it's that sort of classic, there's got to be a better way. So Ben Eachus was early at the Honest Company, and he was on the logistics team. And they said to him, hey, our warehouse in Southern California is filling up. Go find us a warehouse on the East Coast. And Ben sort of went, how am I supposed to do that? Am I going to go knock on doors? How do I make sure they're paying their lease? Like, how do I make sure these are legitimate businesses? And that was really where Flowspace was born. It was out of an idea that if we could formalize the process of finding a fulfillment partner, if we could power that through effective software, and if we could power that through effective services, we could really execute on the service level SLAs that supply chain and logistics leaders require in order for their brands to be successful. Because at the end of the day, you can have a very humble partner, you can have a very flashy partner, but the sweater that I ordered has to actually get to me, right size, intact, on time. And that is a very one-to-one execution. And so Flowspace has been around for 7 years, making that happen.
That's awesome. And you guys, in those short 7 years, have done a lot of things. You've grown rapidly. You acquired, I believe, at least one other company. And just recently, Fast Company recognized you guys as one of the most innovative companies in the world.
That one I'm particularly proud of, because we started talking about the idea of social commerce about 2 years ago.
Right.
So social commerce is, you're going to be enjoying those TikTok videos. Someone might be doing a get ready with me video, and they're, putting their makeup on, and you say, oh, I wonder, what is she using? I want to buy that product. And we looked around about 2 years ago, Jeff, and we said, man, no one in the fulfillment industry is really talking about social commerce, where you are literally filming yourself unboxing a package that you have received. This is like our star moment in fulfillment. And we published some research with Digiday, and about 3 months later, ByteDance reached out and said, we understand that you're experts on social commerce. We'd love to talk to you about being a U.S. fulfillment partner for TikTok Shop. And we said, yes, we are experts. Yes, absolutely. And, 2 years of integration work and building and scoping. We were actually the first ever US fulfillment partner for TikTok Shop in August of 2023. And that is what the Fast Company recognition was actually for. So it was 2 years of really earning our way into recognition for that.
Right. That's awesome. That's really awesome. Now, you've had an interesting journey yourself at Flowspace. When we started first working together, you were the chief of staff. You've been in other growth companies, had a lot of success in other growth companies, I think primarily playing marketing roles, came in as chief of staff. Now you're chief revenue officer. What's that journey been like for you?
I really love it. I always sort of joke. I have worked in a different industry every job that I've ever had. And my mother would say I've had more jobs than I ever should have had. My dad was a high school teacher for 40 years, high school teacher, football coach for 40 years. He had literally the same job his entire career. And I feel the opposite way. I'm a very curious person. I love learning. But what I've also seen is the sort of multiplier effect of coming into an industry that I don't necessarily have experience in and really pulling in from every other experience that I have had and having that beginner's mind, as they said. So I am not afraid of it. I'm 3 years in on supply chain. Malcolm Gladwell talks about, the idea of 10,000 hours is what makes you an expert. So I figure I have about, 2 years to go before I'm a supply chain expert. Look at that. But you're exactly right. So I have a marketing background. I've worked in public relations, investor relations, marketing across my whole career. And then when I was having conversations with Ben to join Flowspace, they were hiring for a head of marketing. And I said, hey, I saw you're also hiring for this chief of staff role. I plan to be a CEO someday. This would be amazing exposure for me to get to work across the whole business. What if I did both? And he was like, no, you need to pick one. And at the end of the day, I actually chose chief of staff. I said, this is actually the most interesting to me, that I could come in and really be working shoulder to shoulder with someone like Ben, our founder, our CEO, and really learning how to run a business. About 5 days in, I took over marketing. So my master plan worked. And I served as interim head of marketing until we hired our current head of marketing, Courtney Mole, who's amazing, who actually went through an IPO with. So you were talking about where I've worked before. I was at a company called The Trade Desk as the founding head of marketing on the executive team. And we went from a Series A all the way through an IPO. That company is now on the NASDAQ 100, which I'm just so proud of the work that has been done since I was there. Obviously, the big scale work was really after I had moved on, but I had an experience going into hypergrowth with that organization and really understanding what it takes to actually reach that very elite level. And so, again, every experience I've had has really allowed me to come into each new one with just I think a richness of perspective that I'm very proud of. I love it. I'll have conversations with recruiters sometimes where they go, what is this? What are you, what are you doing? And then I have, I will talk to people who go, oh, wow, cool. You've worked in a lot of different industries. This is really interesting.
Yeah.
And so I have this book, Range, Why Generalists Thrive in a Specialized World. And I give it out like hotcakes because I'm like, no, it's better this way.
Well, you and I both actually have something in common. I actually played a chief of staff role back in 1998 after I sold my first company. And I had the same opportunity to come in and play a role side by side of a CEO that was phenomenal at raising money, doing something that's never been done before. Back then it was handheld mobile applications, which was basically software on a phone, but it was before we could put it on the phone because phones weren't good enough. And we had it on the Palm One device, the first Palm operating system. But no, I had that same experience, and I meet a lot of chief of staffs now, and chief of staff could be anything from kind of like an assistant to a true chief of staff that's, at the executive level, integrating, working with the team. And that's actually back in 98 after graduating entrepreneur school and then having a business and selling it. That's where I first recognized companies need operating systems, right? You need an operating system, and I'm not just talking technology systems, but how you work. And that was the very beginning of me creating peak and understanding like we need to put, yes, we need to know goals and OKRs and KPIs and meeting cases, but you have to put it all together. Otherwise, it doesn't
Yes.
work. It's like if you had a phone and it didn't have an operating system, it'd frustrate you, just like it is frustrating to work in a company that doesn't have one. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that was kind of the beginning to me, and it was because of that chief of staff role.
I experienced you that way because can I tell the story of how we met? Is that interview worthy? So I joined right as we were announcing our Series B in March of 2021. And so I was not part of the raise, but I got brought in literally the week that we announced it. And I remember you emailed me, you cold emailed me, and
I
you
did.
said, "Hey, Anne, congratulations on the fundraise, Series B. That's really exciting. Are you doing any kind of OKRs process?" And I remember I wrote you back and I said, "I'm so excited to hear from you. Not now. I will come back to you." And I think it took me about 2 months to get back to you because I was so new in the role. And you're exactly right. So Harvard Business Review has this amazing article called "The Case for a Chief of Staff." And it says that there are 3 levels. And like you said, essentially level 1 is you're an executive assistant.
Yep.
Level 2 is you're sort of an analyst. You might be kind of early in your career. You see a lot of, sort of junior folks who are in a chief of staff role where you're sort of like a high level EA where you're actually working on projects. And then what they call a level 3 chief of staff is you're essentially a member of the executive team. You are a shadow to the CEO, and then you are sort of a duplicate, which is if they have initiatives that they would want to see through but can't because of bandwidth, they're sort of taking that brain out and handing it to you, and you're entrusted to actually go execute as a member of the executive team. And I'm really just so privileged that Ben and I agreed that that was what I was coming in as, because I had more than 15 years of experience at that
Right.
point, and I feel under my belt. It was hard because that entire time I had that title, people either totally got it and understood what I was doing, corporate development, capital development, organizational development,
Yep.
or they would literally say, "Hey, can you check Ben's calendar? Is he available tomorrow?" And I would say, "Yes, I can," because guess what? Booking is part of being a functioning executive. And I really had no ego about it because I felt like it really let me come into a new industry and really create efficiencies for the organization, which dovetails into, maybe this is a good segue, to talk about how we started working together, which was just a total game changer for us.
Yeah, what was it like before, and then like what were some of the things that made the biggest impact for you guys?
The before and the after. So we had, I think the most important inflection point to recognize is that we had to, like every other organization, become remote first
Mm.
during the pandemic. And for anyone who was following e-commerce story during the pandemic, it really went, hockey stick growth. And at the time, everyone was saying, "Oh my God, the days of retail are over. No one's going to step into a store. We're
Right.
all shopping online now."
Right.
And as you mentioned, I was living in Ojai, and I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm half an hour from the nearest mall. I've been shopping online for years now."
Right.
It just was something that for me was like a little peculiar. But we had really shot out of a cannon during 2020 and into 2021, which was part of the fundraise. We really had amazing um, growth. But the biggest challenge that we had was that we used to have 2 offices. The business team was in Los Angeles with our founder and our CEO, and the engineering team was based in Cincinnati with our CTO, co-founder, and he had just recruited out of that community, and we had recruited out of anyone who was, in the LA radius.
Right.
And so one, you just had, and this is everywhere I've ever worked, every office has its own culture. We had the business team culture and we had the engineering culture, and it's 3-hour time zone difference, but people were in the office together. And so if you want to talk about the before versus the after, the huge change that we had to undergo, just like every other organization in 2020 and beyond, was how do we grow very quickly while not being attached to a certain geography, because we don't know how this is going to go, and
Right.
we have to hire the very best people we can, and also keep the wheels on the wagon, because the concept of entropy, that the universe is expanding and we're tending toward chaos, is real in any organization. You
Mm-hmm.
really have to have a very clear view of where you're going on that horizon line, or
Right.
it's very easy for people to just sort of like, in an absence of that clarity, just sort of shuffle around and everyone's kind of looking at a different piece of the puzzle going, well, what is this?
Right.
Are you seeing this? And the person's going, what? No, I don't see that. I'm seeing this. And you have this very different perspective unless you can all kind of like look up and look out.
Right.
Um, and so the before, if I can just share a story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I joined and we had an OKRs process. We read the book, we were, doing OKRs. And I discovered one day, our process was it was a set of Google Slides and we would meet on them once a month. And it was really almost more of like a KPIs versus an OKRs meeting where we were
Right.
just checking data. And we went from one slide to the next slide, and our sales leader was presenting, and then our customer success leader was presenting. And we had a metric. Specifically, it has to do with in warehousing and fulfillment. Someone can say they want to work with you and then never show up because they have to literally physically move their goods. It's actually very high risk. It can be expensive. And so what I realized was, sales is measuring if we sold a deal, did that client ever show up? And they were at like 98%. And we're like, oh, we did it. We did
Right.
it. This is great. Customer success, very next slide, had the exact same measurement. Did that deal sign up? But they said that deal has to sign up or show up within 90 days, or it is most likely that they're lost, or we're going to have to go re-engage them. So the cost to acquire that customer is almost essentially repeated.
Right.
And theirs was 47% because it was time boxed. And I said, oh, whoops, we're measuring the same thing a different way.
Yep.
Can you all connect and have a conversation and pick one metric to rule them all? Let's pick one. Is it forever or is it within 90 days? And they said, no. I said, yeah, we all want to be measuring the same thing. And they're
Right.
like, no, I'm not grading myself tougher because someone else thinks I should. And we just had to leave it because the answer was no, I'm not going to go change that.
Right.
And it was an interesting moment where you just kind of realize you can have a system in place and the system is not working. And it wasn't for lack of effort. This was a moment where we were in very high growth. Everyone was working as hard as they could. But, we were also at a point where no one was going to reel their line back in to get a lower score. And it wasn't even about who's getting paid and who's not. It was just a genuine misalignment around what the effort and the outcome really were.
Right.
And so I'm foreshadowing the experience that we had when we implemented the peak operating system. So I don't know if you have specific questions or I can just share that story.
No, I love that story. I think it's interesting and it's not uncommon. I remember coming into Flowspace and starting from the beginning of like, let's talk about where we actually want to go. Right. And,
yes.
I throw around a lot of these tools and people sometimes get lost, but it's really about like, where do we want to go? What do we want to do?
Yeah.
How are we actually going to do it? Which I think the how is very often missed. Like people will be like, yes, well, we want to go here and we want to do this. And like, okay, let's go and let's make a slide. Someone make that slide and let's review the slide. But you really have to get clarity on where you're going and agree upon that, right? Like you can't focus until you agree. So once we agree where we're going, now we can focus and then we can say, okay, what do we actually need to do? We can define that. And then we have to define how we're going to do it. And I think what's really unique and interesting about venture-backed companies, one, they're always building things never been built before. So there's no playbook for that.
Right.
Two, every function in the organization is also building. So it's not like you already built a product and we're just selling it now and fulfilling the product. We're all building sales processes and we're building stuff in software and we're products building things.
So
and so it's very cross-functional. And that's why OKRs work really well. Because OKRs, if you build them right and you know how to build them right, you can create these cross-functional objectives and key results that will align everybody together and produce them together. because it's usually not just one team doing one thing and one team doing another. It's together.
Right.
And so I find it is a process. The process needs to be connected, though, and I think that's what makes it an operating system. I think you and I talked earlier. It's the operating system's almost more about executing than it is planning.
Right. Totally. Because I think where people, okay, I'm having an epiphany right now based on what you just said. We don't witness the doing. We witness the planning. I'm going to go sit in a room.
Right.
We had pre-work.
Yeah.
I got to get on an airplane for this. And we're like, planning. Like, we're like the, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, like, hi ho, like, here we go. But we are not really pushed through the natural order of doing things to reflect on how we're doing it.
Right.
Because we've all aligned on the why. And so I hope we're going to get into just the tactics of the peak operating system, because there are a lot of nuances to it that I have come to really appreciate more and more as the years have gone on. We started working together in June of 2021. I was on our camp call this morning going through our OKRs, and it's just, it's such essential alignment that I really can't imagine that not being part of my week, but also part of my execution as a CRO, which is to know what everyone else is working on, to have confidence that those objectives are going to drive my shared key results.
Right.
And that we have created a mechanism where there is beautiful sunlight on every objective, where we all truly do own it together and can kind of challenge each other, but also support each other to make sure that even if that's not my responsibility, I'm doing what I can to make sure that it happens too, because we want to see all those checked off by the end of that quarter.
Right. Feels good.
Oh my God, it feels amazing. It's the part of our pre-work as we go in and we say, hey, how did we do?
Right.
And marking to done versus on track or off track. It's like the little gold stars that you never get when you're an adult. It's the little micro encouragement. Well, I'm curious. Can I ask you a question? Can I turn
absolutely.
the tables on you?
Yeah.
I'm super curious. The story that I shared, we had a system in place, but the way that the system had been executed was still in misalignment. How often are you seeing organizations that either they're like, we don't have anything, like, whoop, or how often are you coming in and you are seeing organizations that have a system that for one reason or another just isn't executing the way that they need it to?
I think often when I come in, what's very clear is all the companies I work with are very well funded, even if they're seed companies, and I work from like seed to exit, so series A, B, C, D. Every company I come in, they're smart people, because these CEOs know they need to hire a great product person, great marketing person, great sales leaders, and they know how to build teams, but they also are hiring people that have experience. So they all come in with experience of what's worked for them, right? And so they all come in with a system. Now, when they now you have 5 new leaders on your leadership team, and they have 5 systems. And I'm not talking about just a system within sales or the system within product, but they don't have like one system to connect them all together. So what they're kind of doing is like, it's like having 5 disparate technology systems that you're trying to duct tape together, and you're trying to empower these people. So, head of sales, like, this is how we've done it before. Like, we should do it this way. And the CEO's like, yeah, let's try it that way. And the head of marketing's like, well, I like to do it this way. So what you come up with is like a bunch of disparate systems that are not proper, don't have the right guy connections, right? And so what's nice is I can come in and show a system, one operating system that connects them all and puts all the gears. Some gears are going faster than others, and we can put it all together and they can work well together. I see it as very simple, but as adult learners, we don't, it takes a little bit to learn some of this stuff. And it's a series of cadences that are closed loops, right? So in the book, I talk about, one of the most important behaviors of high-performing teams is learning. Now that I know that your dad was a football coach, you start to see some of these parallels. But all high-performing teams have a system, right? Every football team has plays. What are plays? They're a system. every coach has a system of, I do practices at certain given days of the season. I have in my practices, I do certain things. It's all a system, right? And
That's
so
right.
companies that want to be winning teams have to have a system too. And I think
Yes.
what happens is if you, let's say, had a football team and you brought in all these football players and said, all right, well, let's just, all you guys figure out how we're going to do this. That doesn't work. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So, the cadence is a learning loop. So it's like the annual is what did we learn from last year? What's working, what's not working? Let's do some
Right.
triage. And now let's do some 3-year vision, 1-year plan, OKR planning. The quarterly cadence, review what's been working, what's not been working. What
That's
did we
right.
get done on our OKRs or not? Now let's set some new OKRs. And then that weekly meeting is the same cadence as what's working, what's not working. Let's discuss what's
It's
on and
so
off,
good.
and let's fix things. And I think you have to have those cadences, and they have to be closed loops. And I think,
Yes.
answer your question, when I come in, there's no closed loops. These loops are going all over the place,
Yes.
and they're disconnected. And I really think if you don't have a clear operating system, you're already broke.
Yeah.
And some teams it's easier to lift up than other teams. But
Mm-hmm.
most of the teams I come in they just don't have clear cadences, and they don't have defined tools that they're using, and they don't have a mechanism for learning from each other.
I think you're exactly right. I will also say to you, I actually think there's a lot of pressure when you're in an executive role that you're supposed to know everything already.
Right.
And then, oh my God, how could you have a meeting where you all discuss what the priorities should be? Shouldn't you know? Shouldn't we all just magically know what the key priorities are? And what's been really cool about the system is that we have been able to, we have a lot of seasonality in our business, for example. Right. We've been able to plan our quarters to commit to achieving high success in seasonality. So just like I have an ad tech background, 40% of our revenue came in Q4 because that's when shoppers are spending. That's when elections are happening. There's a lot of reasons why. We see the same kind of seasonality around retail for the fulfillment industry. And so it's an incredibly high intensity moment because you don't want to ruin Christmas, basically. And so you want to make sure that those packages get out on time and that the systems don't have any latency. And, there's a lot to it. And it's almost become a sort of ceremony for us that when we do the Q4 planning, we've actually backed some of that even into Q3 planning, systems readiness and things like that. It's become a little bit of a celebration and a ceremony for us to have like a crush Q4 type OKR,
right. Yeah.
Where everyone is saying, hey, this is up to us, like high five each other. And it's interesting that you're talking about having the loop closed. I was just reading this article and it was talking about the concept of linear time versus circular time. And so linear time is like, oh my God, the kids are getting so old. We'll never have this moment again. And circular time says, their birthdays are coming up. What a fun time. I love getting to celebrate Q4 in the fall, whatever that is. I feel that way with the peak operating system where, it went from this like terrible grief of like, oh my God, we're not moving fast enough. Time is passing.
Right.
To, hey, we're going to meet in a week and have a really open, really meaningful conversation about something that's challenging. Let's make sure that when we plan for next quarter, we're actually committing to each other that this work is getting done. And so it's created this almost like recovery loop if we keep using the athletics example.
Right.
Where, you're going to go, if you're a runner, you're going to go start training and you're going to, hey, I should use a jiu-jitsu example. But I
try to stay away from the jiu-jitsu example, but I'll give you one after
okay.
this.
Yeah, good. You're gonna peak and then you're gonna taper ahead of the race, but you're gonna do that every single time you train for a race. To your point, and so having that plan kind of helps you say, no, I'm doing lower mileage today because that is the plan, not because I turned into a lazy runner. And I think about like my dad. He was a really I'm speaking the past tense because he's retired. He's still with us, but he was a really singular mind. He would actually script out. He was the head coach offensive coordinator. He would script out every play for every game because he'd watched so much game film against who they were going to play that he would know if they were weak on the left side or whatever it was. And he would actually think of like a video game. He would literally write out every single play for a game and whether or not they would call audibles, and you ran the option, the quarterback was doing whatever they needed to.
Right. You
But
have to
he
have
had
some
a vision.
flexibility.
Yes, you have to. And I'd love to
Fully
talk a little
rigid.
bit more about that too. But he had a vision that that team was executing against game by game, practice by practice, minute by minute within the practice. And I think you're right. Like growing up around that, it really taught me again that sort of idea of like circular time that you're going to lose a game on a Friday, but you're going to go win the next game, and then you're actually going to get to go to the playoffs, and then you're going to go to the championships. And it really gave me a sense for what winning and losing looks like.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, here's the jiu-jitsu analogy. I did train today, and I told my training partner, don't mess up my face because I have to record. I did get a scratch on my face because we were practicing triangles.
Oh,
anyways,
no, I can't see it. If that's helpful.
So I trained jiu-jitsu almost 14 years now. And before that, and I coach wrestling and I teach jiu-jitsu, and I grew up grappling. So I've been on the mat a lot. When I train with new people, white belts, they often go 100 miles an hour and they're going crazy and they're trying to use strength and speed, and they're trying to use what they know and what they have. And that's common. For us, people that have been training a long time, black belts, we just kind of control them and kind of let them waste their energy and time. And we just use technique. Over the years, the technique becomes you and you don't even have to think about it anymore. They're just kind of freaking out, right? And that's kind of what it's like oftentimes when I come in the companies or I'm talking to CEOs and founders. Like they want to go as fast as possible. Nothing's fast enough for them. They're freaking out. And it's because they don't have any of the levers of the business. They don't feel like they're in control of the business. And so they're freaking out, and they don't, maybe like technique and jiu-jitsu, they don't know the technique or the tools in order to figure out how to figure out these levers in the business. And they're freaking out, running 50 different directions at once. The rest of the people are doing the same thing, and they're all hoping that they create some sort of product or create some sort of revenue or create something, and everybody's burning themselves out. And there's only so much time. You have only so much capital, and you have really only so much energy on your team. And eventually people are going to say, like, I don't have any more energy for this. This isn't working. If they don't find a system or use a system that's connected, they're kind of already broken if they don't have an operating system, I think.
I agree with that completely. I'm going to add on to that, which is I also think this has been incredible professional development cross-functionally, where it is very easy to get siloed, particularly in a remote first environment, where you're sort of just like supposed to be responsible for your little part. And what the peak operating system has done for us is it has said, oh, I'm a thought partner to you on that. It's in the other category, like who's responsible for this, who owns it, and then who is part of executing this particular task. And it has allowed me, again, I'm 3 years in on supply chain. It's allowed me to go in and be able to say, oh, how can I support on this, operating OKR? How can I support on this product OKR? And so I also think what it has done, and it has really cross-trained the executive team to be fluent in each other's areas of expertise so that we're not accidentally either stepping on each other's toes or letting stuff hit the floor because we didn't really understand who was going to be responsible for it. It's very clear. There's a name next to who is responsible for it. And if they need help, they put their hand up and they say, hey, I can't do this by myself.
Right. And a lot of people are afraid to put their hand up if you don't create that environment, right? Like they get scared. And I think doing roles and responsibilities once a year or anytime a new person comes in or someone leaves, just to get that clarity. But then the OKRs, the key results and the objectives should also do that for you. But it's creating that environment where it's like, everybody's trying their hardest, hopefully. Right. And if it's something's blocking them, that's what triage is for. It's for all of us to jump in and figure out how to solve the problem and create action. And if you don't have that environment and you're not supporting each other, people aren't going to be honest about what's happening. And now you're going to start losing visibility, I think. There's one thing I want to bring up, writing the book, and you have a great interview in the book. There's one thing you said, and I don't know if it actually ended up in the interview, but in the book, I really broke down the 5 behaviors of high-performing teams, specifically the venture-backed companies. And then I also explained the tools that we use that make up the operating system of Peak. And one of the behaviors is empowerment. one of the tools is triage. And it was hard to write the book linear because all these things kind of intermesh. But you actually made a really cool example about how triage, like you felt empowered by having an opportunity to use triage. And I'd love you to talk about that. I thought that was a real eye-opening to me too.
I have been on the executive team. I think this is my fourth time being on an executive team inside an organization. And we used to operate on what I would call Nunya, which is you'd ask another member of the executive team, hey, I heard you guys are working on this. What are you doing? And they basically say Nunya, none of your business.
Right.
and you'd be like, womp womp, and you just had no way of breaking in. And in the most political organizations, that is the currency, is that there are people who know and there are people who are not in the know.
Right.
And I want to be explicit that is not the culture at Flowspace. I'm referring to somewhere I worked many, many moons ago. And again, it was kind of the like Nunya model. So, if you weren't in the room when that conversation happened, you sort of like were not invited to be a part of that conversation. And with triage, I think what I said to you is this is like a very feminist construct, which is this idea of like anyone can put anything on the table for discussion, and not in a sort of Mortal Kombat kind of way,
right?
But for anyone to be able to say, hey, how do we make sure that morale stays really strong in Q4? That's a time where I really worry that people suffer from burnout by the end of it. We need everyone fresh because we're about to have the biggest Q1 we've ever had.
Right.
So like Q4 is important, but we got to keep going. And that doesn't even belong to another department member specifically. That is our commitment as executives to say, hey, we are supportive of the organizational body. How do we make the organizational body as healthy as possible? And so part of what triage has done, Jeff, I think, is really create space for us to fill in the cracks, particularly in a remote first organization. And I really don't have a comparison because I've only ever known Flowspace as remote. But what we have been able to avoid is really the pitfall of people feeling like they can't ask a question about the business when we're asking them to show ownership. When we talk about our core values, they're all really kind of around ownership. And, one of ours is like, make it your problem. And here we have this mechanism that now exists where I'm making it my problem all the time. I've got, 5 things on that list that I want to talk about.
Right.
And it's not going in and like directing it at another person specifically. It's asking questions. Hey, have we thought about this? Hey, have we thought about this? And, I think with triage, the concept that we can put it on the list. We talked about something today, just for example, I put it on the list 2 weeks ago. I had a colleague who was out, and then I was traveling for a site visit for a client last week. So it was on the list, but this is the first time that we actually got to talk about it. It didn't get lost in the shuffle. It didn't pass us by in the river. It got saved. We had a meaningful conversation, and we came out of it with commitments. Not even from the colleague who had been out. We just saved it because I didn't want her to miss the conversation. It's 3 different colleagues who put their hands up and said, oh, I want to be part of pursuing this further. That's awesome. So it also has created a chance for us to kind of like lock arms and say, hey, this is for us. Let's go do it without it being like Nunya. So it's been just an incredible mechanism to really show up and feel like you can claim your power and ask questions and challenge each other, but also show up conscientiously and not have that just be like HR's responsibility. It's really everybody's.
Right. That's awesome. I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, I have one last question for you, and it's a fun question because it doesn't always have to be business. All right. So Desert Island, you have a boom box that has an endless supply of batteries. You can only, and it's a cassette tape. There's not even, it's not even a CD. It's not digital. Yeah. But you're going to be on the stranded island the rest of your life, and you could only bring one cassette tape with you. What album are you bringing?
Do you understand that anyone younger than 40 probably doesn't have the concept of an album on a tape?
Right.
They literally would not be able to answer this question.
They wouldn't.
Yeah.
What are you
I'm
bringing?
also laughing because I can only picture actual cassette tapes that I owned where if you were in the car and it got to the end, it would play the next side.
Yeah,
Whereas when you've got the boombox, you have to take it out and flip it
that's
over.
right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, so let's pretend that this boombox is magical and it'll just play the album on a loop.
That'd be good.
Yeah, okay. Oh, this is such a good question. I'll tell you an album that I wore out when I was a kid. This is so embarrassing. I was obsessed with the soundtrack to the movie The Beaches. Are
Oh,
you familiar
wow.
with Beaches?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I literally the tape like broke at one point because I had just played it so many times. I'm sure I was roughing it up somehow. I don't think tapes are supposed to break like that. That is the one album that I could name if I could just pick an artist that I would listen to forever. I'm a huge Neil Young fan, but it's
Oh,
in the like Spotify era where it just plays. I'm like I couldn't name a single album probably. Um,
that's awesome. Neil Young's awesome.
yeah,
I'm gonna listen to
he's back
Beaches
on
though.
Spotify by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wouldn't. Beaches is like very campy, but it also, I mean, depending on what mood you're in while you're stuck on the island, if you're in a fun mood, it's got some fun songs. If you're feeling hopeless and sad, you have come to the right place because there are some very very sad songs. So I also feel like it would kind of capture the range of my emotions.
Yeah,
Um, but then yeah, Neil Young, if I wanted to just like bliss out and eat a coconut or whatever, try to get rescued.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thanks for joining me on Tech Scenes Unplugged.
This was so fun.
Yeah,
You're the
talk.
best.
We'll talk soon.